Ladies and gentlemen, it may be time to do the dash and make it go fast. What's up, guys? That guy with a pencil here from Fat Doing Soup. Have it on me and keep it on me at all times. Another fun fact. This chapter's a banger, but I'm feeling a little mixed about the end of it. I don't know. I mean, it really depends. It really does depend on how it's handled. This is. I found myself saying that a lot about Nakaba's work, but it really does depend on how it gets handled. Because I'm feeling mostly pop. Like, this chapter is realistically, dare I say, a 10 out of 10 banger. I'm just a little worried. I'm slightly worried about one thing. But then again, Nakaba Suzuki has always managed to surprise me when he does stuff like what he does in this chapter. Furthermore, so like, I'm worried in like heavy quotation marks. Like I'm worried, but we'll see. Just like we always see that I have it on me. But with that being the case, let's not waste any more time. Let's hop right into chapter 203. Light of the Future. And you know what? Now that I think about it, that chapter title does make a nice juicy lick of sense in a certain way. I'll see if I can build into what I think this chapter name title means in the context of the chapter a little bit. But with that being the case, crazy cover page by Nakaba being like, hey, I know it's been a while. The anime hasn't aired a little bit. And I know chapter 203. So you kind of forgot the inciting incident in the manga, right? All the way back in chapter 1. Here, let me remind you of Varghese getting absolutely violated by Ironside. That parallel here showing Percy, and I like this cover page being used specifically, showing the parallel of the inciting incident, the birth of Percy's driving motivation to move off of God's finger and to keep it moving, to get back on Ironside, only to be contrasted by Percy essentially trying to save Ironside this chapter. Even though Ironside in the past destroyed Percy, the one man Percy loved, ruined everything Percy is, and ultimately disregards and hates Percy for everything that he stands for and all that, Percy, thanks to this very same grandfather that was lost, and a brother that is from a completely different mother, let's just say that, in the case of Diodora, he's going out of his way to save Ironside, even if Ironside would love nothing more than for him to not exist in the first place. So I do like the parallel here. We're seeing the source of Percy's despair, but now he's acting as Ironside's hope. I like that. Gobble thing. And also just nice to see the inciting incident again. But with that being the case, we pick up right where last chapter left off, with Percy being like, I dare you to answer the question, Ironside, if you even can. If you say I'm the vessel made by implanting a life spirit into a lost child, then who was that vessel for? But this is very interesting. And this is I mean, like, do I talk about like obviously if you all clicked on a review of this, you saw the twist in the title, right? Like we know what happens at the end of the chapter. But you know what? I'll break it out. I'll sprinkle in points, and then hopefully, as I sprinkle in points throughout the review, you'll realize why I'm a little teeny tiny bit scared of the future with what the end of this chapter stuff sets up. But one of my favorite things about this moment, and just like the general interactions and motions of the four evils across the past couple chapters, but specifically this chapter and last chapter, is very specifically how their humanity is getting in the way, right? And I think, and it's so now I think, you cook with gas whenever you feel like it, well, you weren't weird, but their humanity has been holding the four evils back in a sense. You can tell by Ironside even entertaining this interaction. Right now, he has the wing-like boy with green hair, who he supposedly, in his humanity, already deeply despises. But Percy's right in his face. In fact, Percy's right in his face, posted up like this, looking mad devious. If anything, Ironside should be relishing in this opportunity to boom Percy and wipe him from existence right now, but he's not. He's sitting here, he's listening. He's stopping, he's being right, he's being human, right? And as Igneal pointed out in last week's review, I think I'm focusing too much on the idea of Arthur doing anything complicated to these guys, or anything complicated really happening to Arthur. It's just the idea that they surrendered a lot of their humanity, but not all of it. So Arthur cares about humans, but where before he would have cared about every single human life on a singular level, he now cares more so about the collective. So all these humans dying in Anflin, Who cares? They don't even really support Camelot all that much. Who cares how many humans need to die? Who cares how many people lose their homes, their lives, everything that they stand for? As long as the human species as a whole, the idea of humans live and exist further. Same thing with Ironside. Who cares about whatever the motivation was? Who cares about whatever is the foundation of humanity? As long as he serves King Arthur and he's serving humanity, he's serving Camelot, then everything works out. Same thing for all the rest of the four evils. But because there still is that base, there's this innate, unoptimal nature to the four evils, and to even Arthur himself. So let's be real. Let's be real. Let's be real honest with ourselves. If all four evils showed up, and very specifically Pelgard and Ironside showed up out of nowhere, nowhere, I can excuse Worlding, right? She can teleport. We've seen her teleport before. We know she can teleport between dimensions. All that stuff like that. I can excuse her. But if Pelgard and Ironside have shown up, why is Arthur not here? Obviously, Lance isn't here, but he has 3 of the 4 knights here, and he knows that Lance exists, presumably. The god of war can be no one else but Lance, but now he has hardline confirmation that 3 of the 4 knights are here. And once again, the reason he was so confident into moving into overdrive with his plans was because he thought one of the knights was dead, meaning this prophecy was averted. But now, Arthur, who has all the incentive in the world to show up and at least give one of the knights backshots, isn't here. He's listening to the 4 evils. And as we know, this chaos supplement that's inside all of them, we learned in this chapter, we get it hard confirmed. It was kind of implied already that a lot of people already predicted, so technically we didn't learn, but we got it hard confirmed in this chapter that the chaos inside of them is a hive mind. It's one unique entity, which at least to me, someone implies that chaos as a whole kind of operates like the symbiotes in Marvel, where there is just one net hive mind. And I think Arthur, no matter how busy he is doing whatever he does in his little main Camelot dimension, presumably would probably notice all 4 of his evils converging on one spot through the chaos connection that they have. But he's not here. He's not here giving them backshots when very easily he should and could. Why is that? Because of his humanity. So that idea also does give me hope for what happens at the end of this chapter, because Arthur still clearly holds some humanity, and so do the 4 evils. That's why they're engaging. That's why they're not simply executing orders. That's why they're worried about things like fun and vengeance and hatred towards these specific people, instead of just executing optimally. They're not machines. They're not monsters. They are still men. And that's what is allowing for the facilitation of this conversation in the first place, where Percy can poke and prod at the memories and get this close to Ironside without immediately getting slashed down. And we see that the source of this conflict, that basis of humanity, is currently climbing up the tower. I believe it's Diodora and Isold, and it is Isolde and Isold 2, who will be called Izzy from now on, if I can remember to. I will probably forget. But essentially, Isolde and Izzy are also coming up on Snark. As Percy asks, then what was that vessel even for? For whose sake did you create that vessel? Percy is poking and prodding. And this is one thing I'll admit I like. I was talking about the knights, or the 4 evils and their humanity, and how Arthur's humanity and their humanity is making them act suboptimal, not fully playing into certain roles and goals. And it makes sense, considering they still do have human bases, so they would make unoptimal, more human moves based on emotions and stuff like that. Same case here for Percy. Percy, while we still have gotten little to zero context of what happened over that 2-year time skip, we got nothing. Like, we've gotten hints, but that's it. We got nothing but hints of what happened over that 2-year time skip. And we have assumptions, leaps in logic we can make. That's it. That's all we got. Percy has very clearly changed and evolved. And what I like the most about this change in evolution is what it's done for Percy and his mentality. Not only is he a lot more ruthless, remember, he immediately tried to murder Worlding. Like, there was no hesitation there. He's just like, no, and then immediately tried to boom her with a spell. But also, I love the almost haunting tactician he's turned into in a way. Percy's still very clearly defined by his very human rage, right? He may be a life spirit, but he's not fully unbiased. You can tell by how hard he's gripping his sword. You can tell by the glare and focus in his eyes. You can tell by the fact that he probably doesn't even want to do this. He's only doing it because of that connection and his love for Varghese. But is also that humanity that is allowing Percy to facilitate conversation in the way that he is, yet also the core of why he's different, right? He, like the 4 evils, is a being based in something that is innately inhuman now. Just as the 4 evils are human bases now infected with chaos, Percy is a human base infused with a life spirit. But Percy's humanity is running through, well, not running through, running free, but Percy's humanity is still being integrated into his life spirit nature. Why am I lagging? Why am I lagging? Am I lagging or am I tweaking? I'm lagging. Why? Why are we doing so good? We're doing so good. Please stop lying. You're gonna give me a heart attack. But with it being the case, Percy's humanity is playing in fantastic contrast to these two, because like I mentioned, Percy is a light spirit with human tendencies, and now just as these are chaos vessels with human tendencies. However, there's a fundamental difference between Percy and them. It's Percy's memories allowing him to maintain and bolster his humanity. Meanwhile, it is chaos inside these four evils that is suppressing and undermining their humanity. But ultimately, just as Percy could not escape the human nature he developed, the at least for right now, maybe it'll change at the end of the chapter and next chapter, but for now, the four evils are not able to fully abandon the humanity that defined them, that they were innately born with. And we see, as Sia and Snark and Diodora and Isold and Izzy all climb up, Diodora says, "Dad," obviously in reference to the fact that he was the one that was supposed to have a vessel made for him. But we see that the humanity, the core, the basis of Ironside is starting to... What are you talking about? We see Percy still glaring at him. And Beltreep is a little bit like, "Gangaroni! Lock in! Enough of the back and forth, Ironside!" But Tristan, of all characters, my glorious, handsome, legendary, demon mark wielding king, says, "Beltreep, you're much the same way!" And Beltreep is like, "What on earth are you talking about? I don't even have a son!" Wait, why do I know he had a son? Wait, what's happening in my mind? But we see Tristan declare, "You have someone you want to protect too, no matter the cost. You have a daughter that you love above all else. Losing you cost her all of her trust she had in Camelot. And now she's all alone here in Onfwyn." Which is honestly the most hilarious and tragic fate. She lost her daddy only to be put in the realm that her daddy has complete control over. Like, it never even clicked with me until just now thinking about that. But her loss of faith, yet desire to see her father, led to her losing her father, literally, but not losing him in a physical way because he was still there. But I do like certain details of this. One, I like how Beltreep is putting out, "Gang, you're being unoptimal. Let's keep fighting." But he's still not attacking anybody. He's still sitting here chatting. So obviously, he's not being fully optimal because he's still human. Same thing with World Dane, who's just floating around standing. And we know Belgard doesn't even attack anybody in this chapter. But Tristan, very specifically, the details I like on him is you can see that he's sweating. You can see that the markings on his face are getting thicker. You can see the forehead marking of his demon mark, just like his granddaddy, and the marking coming down his face. They're all getting bigger and bulkier, and he's starting to sweat. And he's even breathing heavy. You can tell by the puff here. He's starting to lose a little bit of control of demon mark, which is why I think we see him leave the form pretty quickly earlier on in the chapter. But, with it being the case, we see a sad Izzy and a determined Isolde being like, "Why on earth did I try to ride a snake? Why on earth did I try to ride a snake? Why am I riding a snake right now?" But Tristan calls out to Beltreep, and notably, well, Tristan and Gawain, they get to flexing a little bit. Because Beltreep swings his spatial slash and says, "A daughter, stop with your ranting. There's no way I have anyone like that." But not only do Tristan and Gawain both die, look at them, clean, smooth move. But we see Tristan declare, "You reached out and abandoned your chaotic force in order to protect Isolde, didn't you?" Now, admittedly, obtained. I read that completely wrong. "You reached out and obtained your chaotic force in order to protect Isolde, didn't you?" And we see, not only do they dodge, but Gawain, either through a warp or just sheer speed, gets behind Worldane, domes her with an ice spell, and then Tristan immediately blitzes behind Beltreep and slashes him away. Now, notably, they don't do any damage to the knights here, but still, very impressive they're able to do that and then knock him away. Beltreep even slams into the ground. Meanwhile, Worldane does actually manage to recover before hitting the ground. But look at a certain glorious, handsome, thick, scrumptious, beefy man. He's kind of just... Nothing's happening, right? Kind of strange. Huh. I wonder what's happening with Pelgard right now. I wonder if anything chaotic is going on in his mind. But with it being the case, we see Beltreep start to shake and then consider. Not just one ellipses with an exclamation point, but just a traditional ellipses. A dot, dot, dot. And we see Pelgard also with the slightest bits of motion, but not saying anything, not even making any sound. And Worldane, the only person who admittedly we just don't know We don't know. We don't have enough information on Worldane. I saw really good theories in the comments that Worldane may, in fact, be a former apprentice of Merlin. And maybe that's what she gave up, those ideas of possibly wanting to be like her master, and that was allowed her to become super powerful and super dangerous. She could be, like, essentially not necessarily a proto-Vivian, but, like, I guess technically, it depends on where she comes from. Because I've seen people say she's possibly from the ancient ages, or she could be from, like, the modern Camelot age, and she was just trained by Merlin. Either one's possible. But with it being the case, that could be it. We still don't know her base motivation. But since she doesn't have one, at least not one that the knights can very easily poke and prod at, while Beltreep starts to go, and we see Pelgar start to go, well, obviously he's not making any sound, but Worldane simply asks, am I tweaking? What on earth is happening? Why is that man barking? What have you done? But look at that. Even Worldane's humanity is technically slowing her down. Why is she not attacking more optimally? Why is she not dodging? Why is she asking questions and not trying to just get that work done? At the core of themselves, all four evils are still human. But human may not be enough. As we see, that Gother is, in fact, still inside their mind. Which does make me wonder, how is he doing this? Like, unless, well, he may have just left a piece of himself in there. But remember, real world Gother, who we don't see at all in the chapter, but real world Gother is one arm, like half a pectoral, and a head. That's all that man got. So I'm shocked he's actually still able to project himself like this. Which does imply like a more AoE range to his spells, which has been shown before. But I'm guessing maybe he still just has a light arrow inside of Beltreep. I'm guessing that Beltreep didn't notice. I don't know, it does seem pretty weird, especially considering Gother, if he does have this ability to instantly project himself, he could have done something to stop himself from literally getting bisected, maybe, on either occasion. But, with it being the case, Gother is inside the mind of, I'm guessing still Beltreep, but it doesn't matter, as he admits. Actually, no, it's in Beltreep. No, yeah, it is Beltreep, because we see Izzy here. But, Gother is naturally a little bit confused as he looks on the chaos getting thicker, bulkier, juicier, fatter, thick with 3C. Now, but we see that Gother asks, what happened? The chaos that grew wild in their minds, it's reacting in the oddest way, like never before. You see the chaos itself really start to bubble and grow and break over and like interlink with all of these memories, spreading out these dark tendril-like thorns and them getting thicker and thicker and thicker as the memories are poked and prodded at. And Izzy says, Father! And, obviously, Beltreep himself says, Izzy. What's happening, though? As everything's getting so thick. Not just the plot is thickening, but the cast itself is thickening. But hold on. Wait a minute, let me just take a sip. Oh, stay hydrated, folks. Oh, they hit the spot. But we see, as the chaos begins to grow and mutate, the very interesting thing is that Gother doesn't know what to do about it. And very specifically, he begins to theorize. It's transforming in order to fully cover up these prodded memories? And you know what? This does actually raise a question. In fact, let me strike a pose. Did Arthur have to do it to him? Or was this a contingency plan? Or was this always the final plan? That's my main question. Because obviously, Arthur, presumably having gone through some humanity, sacrifice, and suppression himself, was willing to make that choice. Once again, the needs of the many versus the needs of the few. As long as the concept of humans still exists, it doesn't really matter how many of them die or how many of them suffer. So I do wonder if this whole instance of these memories being poked and prodded, leading to the reaction that we get by the end of the chapter. I wonder if this is all according to Arthur's Keikaku. Is this all according to plan? Did he want the four evils to be disobedient so Chaos could take further reign of them like this? Because notably, if we have to remember, Arthur didn't even really want to forcefully imbue Chaos into Pelgar and Ironside. He just put them in a scenario where they would agree to it anyway. So it seems like it's somewhat a consensual thing, but obviously with the suppression of memories and stuff like that, I'm wondering how much Arthur knew that this would very likely happen and how much he planned for it versus it being just one little happy accident. As we see that Percy asks, Gother, something strange is going on. And Gother asks, after appealing to Ironside, you mean? Or with Beltreep? And Percy straight admits, well, I'll be real with you, big dog, with all of them. And we see all 4 of the 4 evils just like, except remove the snoring because they're not even breathing. I wonder if I faked. There's one bit I did a while ago where I like pretended to pass out on camera, and apparently I got some people. So I wonder if I got anyone by the 3rd snore. But with it being the case, all 4 evils are hard locked. They are stun locked. They are paralyzed. Notably in slightly different poses. We see that Worldings lean back. We see Pelgards lean forward. Bels lean forward, and Ironside seems also to lean forward. So interesting that all 3 of the people who we do know have concrete memories are sort of being weighed down by them, leaning forward. Meanwhile, Worlding, who we don't know what they're restrained by, is leaning up and looking towards the sky, almost as if she's looking towards a the light of the future. As all these people are being trapped in the darkness or the light of the past. But with it being the case, we see that Percy admits as he gets close to Ironside, they've frozen up like statues. And Gother hits the like this straight look of huh? Which I love. Notably, a detail I don't think I've ever pointed out before. Or at least if I did, I didn't point it out too explicitly, so I don't want to point it out here. I love that our ancient cast is practically in the same boat as our modern ones. And by our ancient cast, I really do just mean Meliodas and Gother, and technically Elizabeth as well, because they all have memories of the 3,000-year past. They all have multiple lifetimes worth of experience. They all have this. They were so knowledgeable in the original series. Like, literally, Meliodas had the entire plot on lock, basically from round start all the way up until the Chaos stuff. But I like how Gother, who's already established to sort of be either the smartest character in the verse or second smartest character in the verse living-wise, other than, like, Merlin herself, obviously. He's looking at it like, dog, I have no idea what's happening. And I don't know why I'm like, hold on. Yeah, what I don't know what, see, I was doing so good. But now I'm just lagging over and over again. I don't know what's up. Sorry about that. But, there we go. But I love that characters as ancient and as knowledgeable and as wise as Gother, and presumably Meliodas, are kind of just up a creek with this chaos stuff. They've never encountered it before. They have no idea how any of it works. And Gother literally hits his face because he's like, I don't know. And so he literally starts to theorize. He says, the chaos likely shut off all their senses in order to hold back their memories. But now it's clear that chaos planted in those 4 is all one whole. Now, of course, this does raise a question on top of a question. And notably, it is interesting how they were in different poses, but now they're all seemingly leaning back and struggling to even maintain their stance. And Worlding looks the most like Monster Mash. It was a nighttime smash. Like very posed up like this. But, with that being the case, what was I just about? Oh, chaos planted in those 4 is all one whole. This raises a question. Of how it works. Does it work like a traditional hive mind, where every bit of chaos that's implanted in anybody, anywhere, everywhere, is all just part of Arthur in his own mind, and chaos by proxy, and thusly they're able to monitor and review everything? Or did Arthur create a separate line, like a sort of piece that broke off on its own? For example, I'm going to use, can I spoil? What is the cross-section of people who read Four Knights and then read Venom comics? I don't know. Is it like really? I think it's kind of a spoiler because King Black's a relatively new run. So maybe some people. Light spoilers for the King Black storyline in Marvel with Venom and Eddie Brock and all the stuff like that. But essentially, in the Marvel universe, there is a being known as Null. That being, very similarly to Arthur, runs on a hive mind system. So everything that they create, everything that they produce, operates on one singular hive mind, and they have control over everything in that hive mind. However, there are certain beings that were still made by either the descendants of the creatures that Null made and or Null himself that have broken free, quote unquote, of the hive mind. As in, they are not linked to it, they're not subject to the command. But of course, those beings have sometimes created their own hive minds, their own kids, their own little thing, their own little pocket. So I do wonder the same case here. Is this a piece of chaos that was split off from the main and then divided up amongst these four in order to give them all amps, but not link anything back to Arthur? Or they all link directly back to Arthur in some strange, untangible way? Like, where was I going with that? Linked with Arthur in some strange... Essentially, I do wonder how the hive mind works. Because obviously, if all the chaos is one pure whole, then that means the entire big scheme that is the rest of chaos presumably has at least some knowledge of the other offspring it made, right? Like, it would probably be able to at least somewhat understand what's happening. So it's why I brought up earlier Arthur being very human, because realistically, he should sense this. If the chaos is going haywire inside of them, and they're some of the only chaos imbued people here, yeah, I don't know how Arthur isn't sensing any of this all over the hyperlink hive mind intercom and coming to show up. Because remember, Gother and Ironside showed up out of nowhere. But with it being the case, we not only just get the confirmation that all four have a one singular piece of chaos, which may link back to the main hive mind one way or another, but also that the only person who can hear Gother is Percy, which is actually kind of hilarious. As Gawain asks, "Who have you been talking to?" And Percy says, "Oh, Gother." And I love how Tristan's like, "Huh? Wait, what? You're speaking to Unc?" Hold on. I am a little bit eepy. I will read it. I'm a little eepy. But I'm going to get through this entire review, whether my body likes it or not. So we're going to do some jumping jacks, folks. Oh, I'm scared. I'm a little too heavy to be doing jumping jacks. Wait. I don't want to be jiggling too much on camera. Get the blood flow. 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 Yeah. Ming, ming. Ming, ming. I'm not gonna kick. I want to see my feet. But ming, 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 ming. There we go. We're gonna get through this review. We're gonna analyze everything. This is a full analysis chapter. Let's see. But once again, I love that Tristan's like, "Wait, you've been talking to Gother?" And I do wonder why Gother is only talking to Percy. Like, dog, if you can broadcast everything, if you're still in Percys' mind while he's far away, seemingly not impaled with a light arrow, because we don't see Percy impaled with one anywhere. Why aren't you talking to your nephew? Huh? Why not, Gother? Why not? But with it being the case, we see that Gother, while he is linked up to them, or at least linked up to Percy, he can't actually tell what's going on. Because his consciousness is still linked inside them, watching the chaos go crazy. But we see that Percy's like, well, I can't see what's going on, but not very well. But, actually, no. That's not what Percy says here. It'll be later. As Percy goes, huh? And then Gother says, if you can peel this chaos away from them, all four evils will be released from it. We could make them normal people again. And Percy's like, oh, wait, that's great. That's crazy. Is his pencil still lagging? No, he's not. But Percy's like, great! We can make them normal again if we remove the chaos. And Tristan's like, huh? What? I'm about to start tweaking out in teamwork right now, bro. And then Gawain naturally says, all right, but how? Which is the most fundamental question on how this would work. And I will go back to a symbiote analogy. In fact, I'll read this one line of Gother and immediately go back to the symbiote analogy that I was making earlier. But Gother says, that is the biggest problem. Honestly, I've not a single clue on how to achieve that. And that goes back to a symbiote idea. So, in Marvel Comics, once a symbiote infuses with its host, it gains complete control over their biological structure. Like how they are, where they are, why they are, like how their body functions, it works. There are different levels of compatibility, but let's use Cletus Cassidy Carnage for an example. He is essentially fully infused with his symbiote. So the symbiote can essentially turn Cletus's whole body into mush to do whatever he needs Cletus's body to do in whatever shape, whatever way, whatever form. But by proxy, it would be really hard to remove Carnage from Cletus, as Carnage is literally infused into Cletus's bloodstream. And I'm guessing the same thing happened for the four evils. Because remember, we saw what happened when one of the four evils' human half died. Remember Percy, start of part 2, used the death spell on Worldane, and then she immediately shriveled up and ended up old? but she was still seemingly human-like in some way, just very, very old. That's because the chaos was literally inside of her, infused with her being, and still there. So if a death spell wouldn't wring the chaos out of them, I don't know how they'd remove it either. They would probably have to do some sort of astral plane manipulation or some messing with their life spirit, which is, I'm assuming, what Percy could do. But even still, really debatable. I actually don't have any idea on how they would remove it. And not even Gother. And once again, it goes to the idea of chaos is so new that even a character as ancient and wise as Gother and Meliodas, they just have... I'm throwing Meliodas in here because he's the only other ancient character alongside Elizabeth who has memories. But all three of these very ancient, very knowledgeable characters just have no clue on how to deal with it. They have no way to even fathom on how to work around this problem, because it's the core problem, right? They still do want to save them in some sense, and also they're literally kind of impossible to kill as long as they're infused with chaos. So even if they did want to boom them, turn them into normal people just so they could take their lives, it still wouldn't be enough. And of course, hearing the news that Gother says, yeah, you should peel it away, but I have no idea how to do that, Percy goes, oh no. But suddenly Gawain and Tristan, more on edge, immediately notice two figures leaping up from the depths. It is Sia and Diodora. Well, I guess it's technically 5 figures. Sia and Diodora, and Snark with Izzy and Isolde. As Diodora says, Dad! And Izzy says, Father! And Percy's shocked to say, Diodora? And then Tristan goes, Isolde! And Isolde too! Which is kind of funny, because Isolde and Isolde 2 obviously implies like 2 as in they're both here, but also Isolde 2 as in there's literally Isolde number 1 and then Isolde number 2. But obviously Gawain is a little bit annoyed by the arrangement. It's like, we gotta give her a different name, because isn't this confusing much? But naturally, while the Four Knights are slightly tweaking and definitely need their chaos removed, let's say they try. They try, as my brain lags hard, as Diodora says, Dad, it's me, Diodora! And Izzy runs over to her father and says, Father, it's Isolde! Open your eyes! They both run, and Isolde very particularly stays by Sia, who just chilled. He just sat down and was like, whatever, I'm just chilling with your dog. And Snark was like, I wasn't really tired of climbing up this tower, dog. It was actually pretty tall. And Isolde was like, I could be using my Meligalantier AP to actually damage that big thing down there that they're fighting, but I'm not going to right now because I need to guard Isolde for Tristan. But, all that being the case, we see that actually hearing the voices of those they chose to love, or not chose to love, but those they sacrificed their humanity for, does bring back a stronger instance of it. As simply at the calling of Diodora's voice, Ironside, who was frozen, staggers, wobbles, and falls to his hands and knees. As Diodora yells, Dad! And Ironside goes, I'm tweaking. And we see that Izzy goes, Father! And she bangs on his armor. And notably, Beltreep reaches for his helmet and goes to take it off, disconnecting himself from chaos for a moment to revel in his humanity. But there's one thing I do want to mention here. This is why I think the chapter is called Bright Light of the Future. Not only because it's the Bright Light of the Future in the Four Knights, as in Percy and Tristan, because Gawain was kind of just here for the vibes, that got the Knights to freeze up and the chaos to evolve back in the first place. The Bright Light of the Future is trying to be consumed by the chaotic darkness of chaos, obviously. But also, the stronger the light shines, the harder the darkness will take control, as we'll see in a little second. Because Diodora and Izzy, two beings of the light of the future, the light of the future, they're the ones coming to try and illuminate their parents' memories. And at first it starts to work, right? Because Beltreep grabs his helmet, lifts it off, and we get a calm little face reveal for Beltreep. Obviously, I, like many others, I went straight to the, I'll admit, rather than record the live reaction, which you can check out over on Patreon for $1 a month. You can remember for $3 a month. It's a 25-minute live reaction. In the live reaction, I pretty much immediately had to look it up. You know I had to do it. And I, like many others, when I saw on the Reddit, a lot of people said this just looks like an exact copy of Ironside, or not Ironside, of Escanor's Wanted poster. And I will admit, it's not an exact reuse of the design concept from Nakaba. You can tell that Escanor, as he's drawn here, has two frills, and they're a lot more like spindly and thinner in comparison to Beltreep and or Damon's one super thick frill. You can see that the mustache on Escanor is a lot thicker and fuller. Meanwhile, Beltreep just has like the two dances here. We see that Escanor not only has the goatee that Beltreep has, but he also has he has like a little chin strap going on with a little bit of his beard hair. So it's not an exact rip, but it's close enough Also, their noses are different. But it's close enough that I genuinely do believe they are brothers, and I do really like that. I actually do like seeing how much Beltreep, looks like Escanor, considering they are siblings. But we see he asks, "Is that you? Is he?" Yes, I'm headcanon that the helmet changes his voice that much. No, I will not elaborate further. But with it being the case, we see that she's so happy to get her daddy back. And she immediately hugs him. Yes, yes. That's what you called me as a young child, father. And that is also how I shall be referring from Isolde 2 from now on. We're calling her Izzy. Because I can't keep going Isolde 1, Isolde 2, small soul, big soul. Though, admittedly, it's going to take me a while. And who knows, I may forget this by literally next review. Because we are on break next week, I do believe. But with it being the case, we see that Tristan is like, "Oh, well, butter my behind and call me a biscuit. That's great. I don't have to stick a name mark anymore. It's working. Maybe we can bring them all back this way." And as he goes back to base, thinking the battle's over, Gawain is looking on, just like Gother was, hitting the same. He ain't got a clue in the world. As she says, "Well, I don't know if it's going to go that smoothly." But we see seemingly it continue to go smoothly as Ironside takes his own helmet off, once again unlashing himself from chaos in order to fully give into his humanity for a moment. As Diodora declares, "Please, you have to remember me. You've been deceived this whole time, Dad." And Ironside, sweating buckets, goes, "Diodora?" And Diodora starts to cry. And notably, Percy even looks on with what is a sad smile. And that is one thing I didn't mean to mention earlier. Another thing I really like about post-time skip Percy is not just his wittiness, his awareness, and his ability to take things a lot more seriously than pre-time skip Percy, but I do like how his emotions have changed. In part 1, Percy had this very distinct underlying current of sadness. We saw it come to the forefront occasionally in part 1, but notably the loss of Varghese, the betrayal of Ironside, the acts that took place, they all scarred Percy in a unique way, but a way that sort of gave him sadness. Over the 2-year time skipping, especially after the reveal from Mortlock, that sadness turned into a festering anger. And you can see it with how Percy is more on edge, more direct, and more deadly throughout all of part 2. And even the rage he shows at the start of the chapter. But even Percy, going through all these complicated feelings about Ironside, cannot help but smile at seeing them reconnected. But it's a sad smile because he knows that Diodora was able to get a proper eternal reconnection with his father. But Percy, with the loss of Varghese, will never get something even remotely close, which is something of a terrible fate for Percy. And that's real sad. But with that being the case, fortunately, things can never go that smoothly. As Ironside goes, "Run!" As blood begins to drip from his eyes, his veins begin to pump, his body and skin begins to crack, as sweat runs down his face. And we see as the tears of joy pause and turn into tears of fear on Diodora's face. He goes, "Huh?" But suddenly, Ironside lurches back up, throws his palm out, pushes Diodora away. Very, very hard, in fact. Like, he pushes Diodora so hard, the boy basically doesn't flip. And rolls. And then we see that suddenly even Beltreep begins to and Izzy says, "Father, what's wrong?" And Isolde immediately being like, "I have one job to keep. Tell my man, so he'll marry me. Something to be sure. Get away!" She immediately rips Isolde too. Gosh, no, I said it already. She immediately rips Izzy away from her father. And we see that even Worldane, who so far has done absolutely nothing wrong, at least on her end, obviously she's a terrible person, but she's done nothing wrong in terms of like disobeying Arthur or anything, because the chaos is all one, even she starts to and Helgard has one of the most terrifying reactions. Obviously, Ironside is bleeding out the eyeballs, but Helgard literally begins to starts genuinely foaming at the mouth through his helmet. And Gawain, Percy, and Tristan all look on. Tristan back in base, of course. And Gother straight up admits, "It's failed." As we potted those memories, the chaos started going haywire, like a contaminated flood. It's big enough to swallow all their memories, including their own selves. Not good. The worst possible outcome, in fact. So, obviously, this goes back to an idea I mentioned earlier. I wonder if this is what Ironside always wanted. Not Ironside. I wonder if this is what Arthur always wanted. Because ultimately, as we'll see, and as Gother describes here, their very humanity is being consumed by the chaos. And while Arthur's clearly kept a bit of his humanity, it is clear, like I mentioned earlier, that humanity makes an act optimally, and it's clear it's the same thing for the four evils. That basis of their humanity, the core of who they are, does technically limit them. So I do genuinely wonder, I'm rubbing my knee like a crystal ball right now, I do genuinely wonder if this was always the plan. Or if this is Chaos and its hive mind acting independently. Just as Chaos seems to have affected Arthur directly, I wonder if this is but a subconscious manifestation of Arthur's will and Chaos's will being born through the fragment that was left inside of him. I don't know. But it is very interesting, and considering this just seems to be an auto-eventuality, it doesn't seem like Arthur himself is directly controlling anything here, it's just the Chaos itself responding. At least Gother doesn't seem to say that Arthur is directly interfering here. Here, right now, I'm thinking this was a bit premeditated. I genuinely think Arthur almost hoped that the four evils would run into their loved ones in order to evolve them even further. And evolve they do. Because we see that Gother says, "Not good. The worst possible outcome, in fact." And notably, you'll see here that very specifically, Beltreep and Ironside both reattach their helmets as they undergo their transformation. They do not stay helmetless, which does have me horrified for what they're going to look like underneath. As suddenly they begin to mutate, to grow, to evolve in a sense. The helmet clicks back on and begins to crack and grow and evolve as two extra arms burst out of Ironside's side. And then Pelgard begins to mutate even further. The spikes that adorn the top of the Black Knight's helmet spike out even further as the holes, presumably breathing and sight, in his mask begin to grind and grit with teeth. Suddenly, Worldane herself begins to spiral and crack and curl into a funnily enough, I keep mentioning symbiotes and the hive mind. This actually looks just like the null spiral. And of course, Beltreep himself begins to take on an even more prominent deer-like appearance with even bigger and sharper antlers and a more narrow and sallow face. All being contained and controlled, though, by the helmet. As you can see, with Pelgard huffing and puffing, his spikes growing and developing teeth, the shape-shifting of Ironside's armor, the warping of Worldane's armor, and the growing of Beltreep's armor, it's as if the armor is no longer really armor. Like a symbiote, chaotically, it's bound to their bodies, bound to their biology, and literally growing and evolving. And we see Gawain posted up, Tristan posted up. That's not Tristan. Percy posted up, Tristan posted up, back in goddess mode. But you're going to have to turn that demon mark and Nephilim mode back on, bro, because I don't think goddess mode is going to be enough. Because Gother declares, "Not even you could handle them as things stand right now. You have to run for it." The four evils have evolved. They've gotten to the point where they are no longer themselves, and they have drastically changed. I will admit, I'm thinking Nakaba ran out of time on Worldane, because this Worldane's design is kind of whack. I know a lot of people still would. A lot of people are really down bad for Worldane, but kind of whack design. But overall, I do like all of these designs. And I like very specifically the differences between them. You can see that Beltreep and Pelgard have literally not just fused with their armor, and their armor has grown over them like a second skin, but they've also become infused with their weapons. Notably, Pelgard gets 2 hammerball arms, when I believe he once held a staff that was dual-sided. So now he's become the staff, essentially. He has 1 big ball in one hand, 1 big ball in the other. For Beltreep, he only had 1 sword, not 2 spears like Pelgard did. So he just has 1 blade arm that presumably has the same spatial slicing abilities, but is much more crude and serrated and stuff like that in comparison to his regular sword. Ironside, very specifically, in an interesting way, does not fuse with his sword. Rather, as his helmet spikes up, he grows 2 extra pairs of arms, very likely to help assist with his cross-type light magic, which reminds me once again a lot of Ludishell and the Flash. And meanwhile, Worldane, since she had no weapon to begin with, she was just a pure magic user, she just loses a lot of her human features and turns into this almost ghost-like effigy. So overall, I love the designs, except for Worldane, it looks a little bit, and I do like what it shows for each of the characters and how some fused and some didn't, how they're all different, and how Ironside essentially became a Tetraman. But the one thing I'll admit I'm kind of worried about, and the one thing that I hinted at all the way back at the start of this review, I don't really like the idea of them just becoming mindless beasts. I do want them to be characters. If you read the original sevendeadlysins, you know what this is reminding you of. This is reminding you and me both of the Endura. And while the Endura were a cool temporary plot point for Meliodas and Elizabeth to overcome, very specifically Elizabeth to overcome, while King and Diane watched, they didn't make the most interesting villains. So ultimately, locking away the four evils' humanity, the darkness of chaos consuming the bright light of the future, chapter title, like I said, I was going to build that back in. Ultimately, it's the idea that the darkness of chaos, literally portrayed in the torrent, the flood that Gother describes here as literally an overwhelming darkness consuming the light of those past memories. If it truly did just make them mindless beasts or just monsters that only serve Arthur's will, that does make them a lot less interesting. While they'll probably be very cool for action set pieces, I do hope that there's at least a fraction of their humanity maintained. I think the whole point is that it's supposed to remove their humanity. But since they're all still at least somewhat humanoid, I do have hope that they will still be people. And notably, I can't tell if Ironside lost his legs here, if his arms became his legs, or like his legs became the extra set of arms, because you'll see that he doesn't have legs in this final panel. So he may literally just be floating and flying with no legs. Or Nakaba forgot to draw them, because this is the end of the chapter. You can tell that Nakaba ran out of time. But overall, regardless of my concerns for their humanity, I'm going to let Nakaba cook. I'm still going to call this an extremely W chapter. I said it is a 10 out of 10 banger. I do think it is. I think it does a fantastic job for all characters involved in it. And I think this is an interesting development. I am kind of sad, though, that at least the base chaos buff for Ironside and Pelgar didn't seem to do much of anything. They were still kind of fodder. That's why they needed this further chaos amp in the first place. And even Beltreep did feel a little bit underwhelming for how much we were building to fighting him. He didn't really do much. Like, did he even do any real damage to any of our 3 knights so far? I don't think he really did. I don't think any of them have really done anything, which is why they needed this further amp, which is unfortunate. I do wish the knights in their human chaos amp forms could do a little bit more, but I guess it does make sense from a power scaling perspective. Our main cast is currently really, really strong, so the knights needing further evolution, or the 4 evils needing further evolution to keep with the knights, does make sense, and our cast and crew just being forced into a run scenario is also very interesting. Will they be able to escape? Yeah, presumably. But I'm interested to see the long-lasting ramifications of this. I wonder if this will be a temporary transformation, and then they'll revert back after the light that provoke the darkness goes away, or if we're gonna see these 4 monsters report back to Arthur, and Arthur be like, all according to Kikaku. We'll see. But overall, a W chapter. If you made it all the way to this review, please leave 4 new beasts. 4 new beasts. Beast as in like wild animal. That's beast. I feel like I'm saying it weird. But 4 new beasts in the comment section down below. And thank you so much for watching. If you want to leave a like, share, comment, and subscribe, make sure you hit that little notification bell so you don't miss out on any videos that come to this channel. Also, you do have a Patreon below where you support me for as low as $1 a month. Things like exclusive videos, early content, and more. So then become a member of the channel for as low as $3 a month to get the same perks and more. So those perks will include the live reactions here, the series I have to review, including the 25-minute live reaction to this very chapter, and variations of all my videos. And if you become a $12 Patreon or $12 member, you can order whatever video you want. Also the link to my Ko-Fi in the description down below. You can drop 5 minutes of a short video, $29 being a small video, or any means at all. Any support is always greatly appreciated. Now, I'd like to thank you so much for watching. Once again, I hope you guys have a wonderful day. This is that guy with the pencil, writing off. I would like to give a thank you to our sketch tier members: Eternal Flame, Redwolf 4765, Astro, Glacier XZ, Zara, Brandon Payne, J2MA, Guillaume, Buddha Uda, Alex Kenny, Enzo, Plant Crone, G Prosper, Swift Strike, Strikeman, and Autumn Mornings Lazo, Kree Panem, Super Flame Zero, Yuki Ally, and Azo2404. Then I'd like to give a thank you to our line art tier patrons: Sean, Midnight Lord 21, Kevin Encarnacion, Dread Zoen, A+A, and Victor Raji. And then I'd like to give a thank you to our ink tier members: Austin Wimberly, Auchia, and Shrimpo the Shrimp. With a long, juicy, thick, hefty thank you to our digital art tier members: J Warrior and AZ Void. And I'd like to give a thank you to our colored art tier patrons: Joaquin Munoz and Joaquin Munoz. With a final Ganshuin legendary super grumdeliumptious thank you to our glorious, legendary, handsome, costume glazing king, Calvin Elder.